5,252. That is a number of days between the Weeknd dropping his debut single and the day that the final Weeknd project dropped in the form of Hurry Up Tomorrow, the film. As a fan who's been there through the good, the bad, and the idle, it is still so surreal to think that the story of the Weeknd character has now come to an end, closing the curtains on what will surely go down as one of the most perfect catalogs in music. However, there's been much discussion over what to make of our final moments with the Weeknd. For something to be an odyssey, there has to be something to go towards, a final destination. After Hours showcases a need for the journey, whereas Dawn FM displayed the Weeknd's desire to go into the light and dance the divine boogaloo. However, Hurry Up Tomorrow, the album, doesn't necessarily give us a clear-cut happy ending that most of us would have thought the Weeknd deserved after going through the proper reflection and self-discovery that he does on Dawn FM. However, I want to propose a quick little theory interpretation that I personally found among my many viewings of this album. Starting off, now in Hurry Up Tomorrow, we witnessed the Weeknd experience a panic attack after the infamous night at SoFi where he lost his voice on stage. This leads him to an existential crisis of sorts, causing him to question how he's lived his life, his relationships, his impact, his legacy. And throughout this album, he struggles with the idea of what awaits him after death on songs like Wake Me Up, Cry For Me, and Enjoy the Show. I mean, the very first line on the album discusses how all the Weeknd has is the impact he leaves in the material world because he believes that there is no afterlife. He clings to the echo his footsteps leave behind in the world, fearing that there's no floor beneath the next. However, it isn't until he channels the love of his mother in Red Terror that he finally feels the love of someone who doesn't just see all the terrible things he's done, who sees more than just all the ways he comes up short. She recalls the story of her fleeing from the Red Terror, a dark chapter in Ethiopia's history, in hopes of providing a good life for Abel. She then reassures him through a poem inspired by Henry Scott Holland's Death Is Nothing at All that she's never left him, and that their memories, her love, will always remain. She is merely in the next room over, a room that the Weeknd will inevitably enter, and when he does, he will be greeted by an old familiar name, Abel Tesfaye. I've discussed in the past about how I wanted some sort of duality in the ending of the Weeknd story, just because it always feels like it could go either way, and in its own way, he actually achieved that. There's a popular interpretation that the Weeknd is stuck in this endless loop of heartbreak, pain, misogyny, and his vices, which is further exemplified in how the very last song, Hurry Up Tomorrow, utilizes the same exact sound effect that starts High For This, the song that starts the very first Weeknd album.
That ending. Huh. Oh, it is! That is a dope little oh, that's so dope. The album transitions to the fucking top.
Chills. This is how real it is to The Rock.
That is, except for these last 2 seconds of silence. This begs the question, why? Why doesn't it perfectly transition into High For This when it so easily could have held out for those last 2 seconds? Well, I believe that it's because there are 2 endings depending on what you, the listener, decide. If you use that feature available on all the music streaming platforms that allows you to blend the last few seconds of Hurry Up Tomorrow into High For This, then you, the listener, essentially give up on the Weeknd and sentence him to an eternity of living the same cycle over and over and over again. His life is symbolized by that little loop or repeat button that we see anytime we listen to his music. However, giving those 2 seconds of silence time to breathe, we choose to hold out hope for the Weeknd, and we're rewarded, as instead of looping perfectly back into the very beginning of the discography, the music cuts out, signifying a moment of peace, of silence, an interruption in the cycle that has held the Weeknd captive for so long. We end the final Weeknd album at the exact moment that the Weeknd dies and becomes Abel Tesfaye, all because we didn't give up on the Weeknd and held out until the final second, or in this case, the final 2. And man, what I love about this is that there's this meta quality built into the quote-unquote bad ending that further proves Abel's thesis on fan culture, stan culture, and that we've seen many of EXO get excited for this whole concept of it looping back into High For This, which again feeds into this theme that he's tackled over and over again in the Save Your Tears music videos and on Baptized in Fear, that there are fans that treat his pain, his trauma, like a jukebox, feeding it coins of nostalgia, hoping that their favorite heartbreak plays again and again and again without any consideration for the tiny man inside that jukebox. Like, the attention to detail and having the end of Hurry Up Tomorrow's final song perfectly transition back to the top of the Weeknd's very first mixtape is just boggles the mind. It's such a subtle detail that closes the loop and brings us right back to the beginning of this 10-album odyssey that took us through so many sounds, scenes, and stories told. Now, of course, this is just my interpretation of 2 seconds of no noise. So, to say that this is the end-all be-all interpretation is not for me to confirm or say. Anyways, y'all let me know if I'm reading way too much into this or if I might be onto something. Just because, I don't know, man, when you have the opportunity to perfectly close the loop on a discography like that, and you don't by just that slim of a margin, I can't help but feel like there's something there. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Like I said before, we still have the gigantic Weeknd deep dive cooking over on Our Thoughts podcast, so please go ahead and subscribe if that's what you're waiting on. Also have my discussion review of the Hurry Up Tomorrow movie, the controversial Hurry Up Tomorrow movie, so please go ahead and check that video out. And also want to direct you guys over to the podcast Kayfabe and Chill, where we discuss all things music, wrestling, films, comic books. It's really just a place for us to, relax and kick up our feet, talk about the stuff we like. And of course, last but not least, please go ahead and check me out on Instagram. Be doing some poetry and shit. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, go ahead and pop on over and check me out. This has been P.O.'s Place. You've been amazing, and y'all are welcome back anytime. But until that next time, I'll see y'all later. Take care.